الله ربنا هو الإله، له من الأسماء ما اصطفاه، الواحد الحي كذا المليك، والملك المالك لا شريك. الله ربنا هو الإله، له من الأسماء ما اصطفاه، الواحد الحي كذا المليك.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. In our discussion on the spiritual and the ritual guidance for Hajj, we discussed about the necessity of doing Hajj as an obligation which God, the Master of the universe, has imposed upon us, that we should come for the pilgrimage and visit to this house, Hajjul Bayt, the house which is the first building on the surface of the earth devoted and dedicated to the total submission to the one true Master of the universe. And the visit to this house and the performance of the rituals of pilgrimage has many advantages, beginning from the spiritual self-development of getting closer to God and therefore perfecting ourselves, to the social advantage of solidarity with the rest of the Muslim Ummah, to the political advantage of transforming this social power to political power, and the economic advantage of the exchange that should take place in this great assembly, and other advantages, cultural and educational, for example. And this obligation is once in a lifetime. That means the power to change and to transform an individual is so great that even if performed once, it has its effect for the rest of life. But in order to ensure that this is performed in the correct manner, we need to identify who is the most learned of the scholars who can tell us the rulings according to the teachings of the mazhab of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. And our first port of call will be the holy city of Medina, where we will get an opportunity to be exposed to the history of the Holy Prophet's stay in Medina, the visit to the different mosques, but of course the most important being the Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. So the rules about prayers in the masjid we discussed. And then once the time is near for the season of the Hajj, because it is wajib to be in Arafah on the 9th of Zul-Hijjah. But before we can go for that Hajj Tamattu', we need to have completed Umrah Tamattu'. So anytime before the 9th, we must have finished Umrah Tamattu'. So usually about a week or so before departure for Arafah, usually is the departure from the holy city of Medina. So we need to proceed to the specified location known as the Miqat, which for the people of Medina is the Masjid Shajara. And there are three wajib acts that are supposed to be performed. One is to wear the dress allowed in the state of ihram, which is the unstitched dress, and then to make the niyyah and the decision, and finally to pronounce the talbiyah, so we enter into the state of ihram. The reason it is called the state of ihram is because in this state now things become haram. Almost about 26 or so actions become haram. So we need to remind ourselves what these actions are. In the miqat, but before I go to the prohibitions, a quick reminder. In the miqat, we are required to pronounce the talbiyah so that we can begin our pilgrimage. wajib to pronounce the talbiyah once at the miqat, which in this case is the Masjid al-Shajara itself, or no, the neighborhood of Masjid Shajara, that locality. So once we pronounce labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, these 4 labbaiks, we are already into the state of ihram. Once is wajib. Mustahab, once we leave the masjid, we board the bus and we leave that locality on our way towards Mecca. Once we are out in the desert, the Bayda, it's mustahab now to repeat again and again the talbiyah. And wajib then to stop the recitation of the talbiyah once we arrive Mecca, at least the old city of Mecca. This mustahab talbiyah, which is recommended to be repeated regularly, it can be repeated in a short formula, just labbaik, labbaik, or no, there is a longer formula, the one we recited in the masjid, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, innal hamda wal ni'mata laka wal mulk, la sharika lak labbaik. This is mustahab, it's the longer one. But there's an even longer version, the longest version rather, which has more dhikr of Allah. لبيك ذا المعارج لبيك لبيك داعيا إلى دار السلام لبيك لبيك غفار الذنوب لبيك onwards. It's mustahab, it should be there in your dua books. And also it is mustahab to repeat the recitation of labbaik, especially when the path of the journey reaches a point where you may have to ascend a hill, or you may have to descend, or you stop and you disembark, or no, you embark again onto your means of transport. Mustahab to repeat it, especially after every Salatul Farida, wajib prayer. Mustahab when you meet any other traveler to repeat the labbaik. Mustahab to repeat it at night till you fall to sleep. Mustahab to recite it, especially in the time of Sahar, before Fajr. And it's mustahab for everyone, even if the pilgrim is in a state where he or she is in a state of hadathul akbar, maybe their state of janaba or the monthly period. And this act, mustahab act, is to be repeated till we sight the houses in Mecca. The significance, the spiritual significance of reciting the talbiyah repeatedly is pointed out in this riwayah of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, when he asks Shibli that when you recited the talbiyah, did you make the niyyah, nataqta lillahi bikulli ta'ah wa sumta an kulli ma'asiyah? Did you make the niyyah that now, with this tongue by which you say, yes, my Lord, I have responded to you, did you make the niyyah that therefore you will now, from now onwards, you will only obey God's command, you will only listen to God, and you will not disobey or perform any act of sin or disobedience? So essentially, the once recitation wajib in the masjid, and then the continuous recitation for the remaining hours till we arrive in Mecca, is a mental exercise whereby we are developing a particular habit, an attitude, a mindset, whereby we are reinforcing and consolidating that we shall only respond to God and God alone, be it by our tongue, we'll speak nothing but that which is halal, be it by eyes, we'll see nothing but halal, ears, hands, legs. Especially now that when we have declared labbaik Allahumma labbaik, I have heard your call, your invitation, I have responded to your invitation, you are my host, I'm your guest, and therefore I will not do anything that will violate the sanctity and the respect of the host, especially now that we've begun the journey from Miqat. And the reason why that place was called the Miqat and not any other place, we did not even start to enter into Ihram inside Medina in the Masjid al-Nabi. We had to go out to the Miqat because according to some traditions, Miqat is the place where the angels descend and come to the presence of the pilgrims. So obviously, the more the impression of the labbaik, the more the effect. And therefore it's mustahab not to repeat labbaik silently. It's mustahab to repeat labbaik loudly. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. In fact, the riwayah says that at the time of the Prophet's Hajj sallallahu alayhi wa the companions would repeat the labbaik so loudly till their voices would become hoarse. I had an interesting case. Of course, this happened after Hajj, but then I would like to quote the example here. There was a lady who came and said, Sheikh, can you advise my son? He is into listening to music. So then I said, if you have got anything to take away from Hajj, then right from the beginning you were taught to say labbaik again and again. So you need to repeat labbaik so many times till it becomes almost automatic and spontaneous and habitual. Till you go to sleep you say labbaik. When you wake up, the first thing you say is labbaik. And labbaik means, oh Lord, I'm going to listen to you and you alone. I'm not going to listen to the devil. I'm not going to follow and listen to my desires. So then if you have said the true labbaik from the bottom of your heart, and you meant it, that only He deserves to be responded to, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, because you are the all-perfect being. And therefore nobody else deserves to be obeyed and listened to, then you should stop listening to any other commander. In fact, the riwayah says, when you say labbaik Allahumma labbaik loudly, everything in the desert to your right and everything in the desert to your left also says labbaik with you. Kwanini, Kusababu, everything else in creation essentially is already saying labbaik. We don't know about it. So for example, in the Quran, there are several verses. Lahu aslama man fis samawati wa man fil ard. Whatsoever and whosoever is in the heavens and the earth is in total submission to God. Total submission to God means everything is saying labbaik to Him only. Or in those verses of the Quran which talk about qiyamah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انشَقَّتْ وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا وَحُقَّتْ. And when the heavens will split before the end of the physical universe and the beginning of the Qiyamah. The heavens will split. This whole physical system, the way we know, will come to an end. The call will be made and the sky will obey. وَحُقَّتْ. And it is in the totality of its nature and its being that it must be totally submissive to the call of God. All of the heavens. وَإِذَا الْأَرْضُ مُدَّتْ. And when all the elevations on the earth are going to be flattened. The most solid structure that you can imagine, the mountains, even they will be flattened. وَأَلْقَتْ مَا فِيهَا وَتَخَلَّتْ. And then whatever is in the belly of the earth will be belched out, and the earth will become empty of the bodies buried in it or anywhere else. وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا وَحُقَّتْ. And definitely it behooves that the earth should obey God and say labbaik to God. The sky and the earth I mentioned as examples. Everything else, be it the animals, be it the plants, be it the sun, be it the moon, Everything in creation is in total obedience and saying labbaik to God, except for one creature, except for the jinn and except for the humans. We've been given the freedom to say no. So now we have to learn to harmonize ourselves with the rest of the creation. Otherwise, the rest of the creation will be used by the commander against us. We can't escape that punishment. So for our own prosperity and success, both here and the hereafter, the formula is labbaik. One of the areas where we need to learn labbaik is our financial obligation. The riwayah says that from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that man hajja bi malin haramin, whosoever goes for hajj with illegal means and says labbaik Allahumma labbaik, then the answer comes from God, la labbaik wa la sa'daik wa hajjuka mardudun alayk. Your hajj is rejected, you are not accepted, because you have come here with property that does not belong to you. The ruling in rule number 828 in the Islamic laws states that if you purchase a dress with means, with money, whose financial obligations have not been paid as yet, then that salah in that dress is a salah which is with a ghasbi dress, and a salah with ghasbi dress is batil. If salah becomes batil, you can make qaza for the wajib salah, the daily wajib salah. But what qaza are you going to make for the salatul tawaf? With salatul tawaf, once it becomes batil, tawaf is batil. If tawaf and salatul tawaf are batil, then your sa'i becomes batil, and then your taqsir becomes batil, and therefore you're not out of ihram, and therefore you're still in ihram, and therefore your umrah is batil. So it's very important for the labbaik to be acceptable that we should pay our dues. A very quick reminder, ruling number 1774 states that it is wajib on all those who make any gains, whether you're a businessman or you're an employee or you are a laborer, whatever means of earning you may have, after 1 year of beginning to earn, when you get the actual cash or whatever is profitable, not from the date you start working, from the date you start earning. After 1 year, you deduct your legitimate expenses, whatever remains as the net profit, then the financial obligation applies to it, and you have to pay. You can decide whichever year you want. You can decide to have a lunar year. I want to start calculation in the month of Rajab, for example. No problem. I want to start the calculation in the month of January. No problem. Lunar year, solar year, that's your choice. The problem is with those people who for some reason do not keep a careful account of their earnings and their expenditures. In that situation then, what you need to do is you make a best estimate of the past year or years in which no payment has been made. What is definitely the amount I must have earned and spent and therefore was my profit. Based on that, you calculate your wajib dues. So if the date is due and the 1 year is up from the date of earning, then you're not allowed to delay anymore. Then it becomes ghasbi. From that time onwards, then that percentage, 20%, does not belong to you anymore. Only 80% belongs to you. So if for whatever reason the date has arrived and you cannot pay, then you must seek permission to use that 20% so that later on you can compensate and pay. So we are in the state of ihram. We have recited the talbiyah. The moment we say Allahu Akbar in salah, we are into salah. Now it's haram to break the salah. So also once we say we have removed the stitch dressing and made the niyyah for the umrah to tamattu', and now we have pronounced the talbiyah, we are into the state of ihram. There is no way to come out of it but by proceeding to Makkah, doing the tawaf, salatul tawaf, sa'i, and then taqsir, then we come out of ihram. In the state of ihram, some things become haram. So in the Quran, in chapter 2, ayah 197, Allah says, فَمَنْ فَرَضَ فِيهِنَّ الْحَجَّ, whosoever in the months of Hajj, Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, and Dhul Hijjah, makes the niyyah to do Hajj, فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ, then there is no sexual relationships allowed in the state of ihram, no specific sinful activities, and no argumentation and disputes allowed in the state of ihram. There are many things that become haram. Many have been explained by the Prophet ﷺ. Some of them have been mentioned in the Quran. So one quick way to remember the long list of prohibitions is to alphabetize them, ABC. So under group A, call them the activities under the category of affectionate behavior. So to look at a mahram or a mahram, or to touch, or beyond touch, all of that is haram. So let me just explain a little more in detail. To look and touch and beyond can be with a mahram person, but this applies to both. The person who initiates can be the male or can be the female. So the rule applies to both. The person with whom you engage in this relationship can be your legal halal partner, or no, it can be a na mahram and prohibited partner. You can engage in this behavior with lust and shahwa, or you can do it without shahwa. The rules differ in these four situations. So let me explain a little more in detail. So the first example, activity of looking at even your own legal partner, halal partner, to whom you're married. To look or to touch, haram, no, it should not be done in the state of ihram. Yes, the partner is legal, but in the state of ihram, no. Just like some activities become haram with your legal partner during the monthly periods, so also temporarily during the state of ihram, it becomes haram. If a person does engage in this activity with shahwa and passion and lust, then it is sinful, and in addition to that there's a kafara and penalty, which is a goat or sheep. You say, but no, there was passion and lust, but there was no excitement. Doesn't matter, even if there was no excitement. Still the kafara applies because it was haram, and therefore there's a penalty. Lesser than touch. Looking at a halal partner, but with shahwa, with lust, haram, not allowed. So if a person does that, and the person gets excited, and it leads to culmination, then there's a kafara, the highest kafara, which is to pay a camel. So it's dangerous. In fact, if it is with shahwa and lust, it is still haram, even if you say, I'm very confident, I've got total control over myself, and it will not lead to excitement or culmination. Still, it is haram. However, if the person is confident, he's a legal partner, you're allowed to look at the partner, but without shahwa. You can't be blind and close your eyes to your legal partner. You're traveling together. There is necessary, essential interactions that take place where looking at each other is required. But so if it is done without shahwa, if uncontrollably, accidentally, unexpectedly it leads to excitement, then no. It's not haram because you never intended it. It was unexpected, and therefore there's no penalty. Penalty only applies to those situations where you know it is going to happen and you still go ahead and do it. That was looking. Touching, so you're helping your partner, and especially this happens when people are in tawaf. For some reason they think they can protect their partner by touching them. So if you touch them once, so long as it is without shahwa, no problem. The moment shahwa enters, you must leave the touch. Because if you don't, it's haram. Not only is it haram, there's a kafara for it. In fact, if you touch a second time, touch, leave, touch, leave. Every time you touch and lust enters your mind and you therefore continue to touch, then there is a penalty, and therefore your penalty keeps on building up. It's not that in one ihram there's only one kafara to be paid for as many touches that you make. No. In a single ihram of Umrah Tamattu, as many number of times you touch and it becomes lustful, with passion, with shahwa, and you did not stop, there's a penalty for that. So a person says, I was in the state of tawaf and I was trying to protect my partner, and during the tawaf, shaitan comes and it becomes lustful. The rule is immediately you must stop the touch. Unless you say, no, shaitan tried to misguide me and tempt me, a lust thought entered, but I controlled myself and the lust went away. No problem. Then you can continue to touch. Some people asked from the marja'. They say, well, I know lust enters, but then I'm caught between two haram. It is wajib to control my lust in the state of ihram, in tawaf, but it is also, I feel wajib that I need to protect her. If I don't touch her, then she'll be all alone, and I don't trust strangers out there. So am I allowed therefore to do the haram of lust, but then to protect my wife? Answer, no, that is no justification. What if, God forbid, the woman falls down, your own legal partner or some other woman, and you go to try to help her, but God forbid, lust enters. If it's an emergency, it's a life-threatening situation, even if it's lustful, lust here is a lesser haram. The bigger haram will be to abandon the person and to allow her to get crushed or to get injured. What about lustful activity with a stranger, a prohibited partner, a na-mahram? Looking at the na-mahram with lust, haram. But if a person does nevertheless look and commits the sinful act, and if it leads to excitement, then there's a heavy penalty. You pay a camel. If for whatever reason you say, hey, even a goat is more than $100 these days, a camel is going to be $1,000 plus, I can't afford that, sawa, then pay a cow. Cow, that's even expensive, I can't afford, then genuinely you can't afford, then you're allowed to pay a goat as penalty. But if a person does do the haram act of looking with lust, and it doesn't lead to excitement, then there is no penalty. It's just haram and sinful. So, conclusion. I'm not going to discuss the other details beyond touch, because these basics are so sinful and there's so much penalty. You can imagine what is there for even a higher degree of interaction, whether it's with your halal partner or with a haram, na-mahram. It can break your hajj. There's no penalty there. Your hajj becomes batil if you go beyond, and you must come back the next year. Don't say that I don't have enough money to pay for the caravan charges. Beg, borrow, whatever do, work extra, get the money as a penalty, come back for hajj. So we need to be careful about how we look and how we touch. Otherwise, be ready for the penalty. You may say, I can afford to pay the penalty, but it's not the question of penalty. It's the question of sinfulness. You're defeating the whole purpose of Hajj. Here was a challenge. Are you going to say labbaik to your animal desires, or you're going to say labbaik to the God who gave you the power to enjoy? And He gives you permission when to enjoy it and when not to enjoy. So this is based on the verses in the Quran. So for example, in Surah Nisa, there's a discussion about which women you are allowed to get married to, beginning from ayah number 21 onwards. And then as a conclusion in ayah number 26 and 27 and 28, Allah says that we have explained to you all the rules about how to regulate your sexual desires. And all of this was for your benefit. And you are not the only ones who are asked to regulate their sexual activities, even communities who came before you. And ayah number 27 then says that, وَاللَّهُ يُرِيدُ أَن يَتُوبَ عَلَيْكُمْ. God wishes to turn to you with forgiveness and grace and mercy. So guide you how to best use your sexual desires in such a way that you respect the other person, you know your rights, you know your responsibilities, and therefore there's a successful relationship. This is the basis of the law. But يُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ أَن تَمِيلُوا مَيْلًا عَظِيمًا. The uncontrolled sexual desires are such that there are some people who want to exploit you so that you may enter and agree into their lifestyle, so that they enjoy from you, and in return they give you joy, but in an illegal, illicit way, which temporarily may give you pleasure, but long term it's harmful for everyone. Just a simple example. I was just checking the news. For those of you who are following the news, there's a big scandal going on in the West about what sort of pictures are posted on the net. And one of the reports said 99%, 99 is not a small number, 99% of women are reporting that they undergo some sort of sexual harassment on the streets in their lifetime. Oh, this is a big number. Women are not safe. So the harassment, they have to suffer the creepy applause and the clapping and the comments that men make when a woman, let's say, even does an innocent act of walking. Let's say she's just going to work, she needs to work, she's going to work, and yet she receives comments and harassment. So clapping and whistling and worse than that, groping and touching, or telling a woman, give us a smile. She feels offended. So the women are defending themselves. They says, excuse me, my walk is not something for, I'm not walking on the fashion parade here so that you've been invited to come and comment on me, on my body and my style of walking. I'm sorry, I'm not available for that, she says. This is not a red carpet that I want you to be an observer and a commentator. It's a sidewalk. And when she's asked to smile, she does smile, but please be careful. This is women defending themselves. That when she smiles at you, she doesn't mean that she's happy with you. The problem is she fears. Because if she doesn't smile, then you may ask her to smile. She doesn't like that. And if she tells you, please leave me alone, don't bother me, don't harass me, then God forbid you will start acting in a weird way. You start using four-letter words at her. This is 99% of the women. Anybody doubts about the necessity of hijab, about the necessity of having discipline on our sexual desires, forget about sharing the marriage bed. It begins from touch. Before touch, it begins from looking. So the Sharia is training us to control labbaik Allahumma labbaik right from the level of looking. The ability to look is God-given. The ability to enjoy the beauty of your partner, God-given. The beauty of your partner, God-given. If everything is God-given, God will decide when is it best for you to enjoy the gifts that He has granted. So that's why we receive many verses in the Quran, for example, Surah Mu'minun, Surah Ma'arij, where Allah says that those who are godly and God mindful, they are always careful about their sexual desires. So this is one group of prohibitions. Another group of prohibitions in the state of ihram pertain to beautification. So applying kuhl and surba, looking into the mirror for beautification, haram. Applying oil, but oil for the purpose of beautification. Using perfume, nail cutting or hair trimming, or any other act. These are examples, but any other act of self-beautification in the state of ihram becomes haram. So let's consider one by one. There are some men who follow the sunnah. It is the sunnah to apply kuhl. So the ruling is that surma, if it is the black type, and if it is for the beautifying purpose, the kuhl has been made for beautification. Whether you use it for beautification or no, I want to follow the sunnah. The sunnah here is not to apply kuhl. Unless it has been deemed necessary medically for you to apply kuhl, then it's allowed. But if it's allowed, then there is a kafara to be paid. And that is a goat if the kuhl is also mixed with some perfume. The second act of beautification, which is haram, is to look into the mirror. To look into the mirror is mustahab otherwise, out of ihram. In fact, there's a riwayah which says when you look into the mirror and you see your beauty, mirror, mirror on the wall, that's not what we're supposed to ask. When we look in the mirror, that's the dua we say. Allahumma, kama hassanta khalqi, fahassin khulqi. Oh Allah, just like you have beautified my outer appearance, beautify my inner character and thoughts and feelings. It's mustahab. Lakini in the state of ihram, haram. So to look into the mirror for the purpose of mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all, haram. What if somebody says, no, I am not going to look at myself for the purpose of beautification. So for example, the driver needs to see the traffic behind, or the doctor is dealing with a mahram and doesn't want to see directly, and therefore is using a reflective surface to make an observation. Or no, you yourself need to look at your face in case if there's anything which is going to block the reaching of water to the skin of your face during the state of wudu, the process of wudu. If it's for non-beautification purpose, then Marhumatul Khoi, Hazrat Ibn Sistani, they say no problem, it's allowed. Marhumatul Gul Paigani says no, it's not allowed, even if it's not for the beautification purpose. Absolutely to look into the mirror, not allowed in the state of ihram. What about if you say, I'm not going to look into the reflective surface, but there's a shining glass or any other shiny surface, I can get a glimmer, a glimpse, and a reflection. Marhumatul Khoi and Marhumatul Gul Paigani say no problem, it's not a mirror, it's allowed. Hazrat Ayatollah Khamenei and Hazrat Ayatollah Sistani, they say no, if it's reflective and you get to see your own image, haram. Even if you say it is not for beautification purpose, according to Ayatollah Gul Paigani. So if you look at the mirror, you have violated the principle, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Eyes are God-given, eyes have to obey God, but temporarily God has allowed me to control my eyes, I've disobeyed. So what am I supposed to do? The penalty for that is, before I talk about the penalty, mustahab, Hazrat Ayatollah Sistani and Hazrat Marhum Ayatollah Gul Paigani say that mustahab to repeat the talbiyah because you violated the principle of labbaik. Hazrat Ayatollah Khamenei say no, not mustahab, ihtiyat wajib, you must repeat the talbiyah. Hazrat Ayatollah Gul Paigani marhum also says you have to do istighfar, mustahab. And Marhum Ayatollah Khoi says not only Do you have to do the talbiyah? You have to even pay the penalty of a goat. But of course, mustahab, not wajib. What if you happen to be in a room, you're not planning to look at the mirror, but there happens to be a mirror in the room. So when there's a mirror in the room, the problem is sometimes your eyes will fall on the mirror. Not that you planned it, but you plan to enter into the room. So the answer is no problem. You're allowed to enter into a room or even a lift chamber where there's a mirror. But better, mustahab, ihtiyat, avoid entering such a room. The third item, which is haram in the state of ihram as far as beautification is concerned, is applying oil. Maybe right now we don't apply the traditional oil, we apply creams. But in the past, the natural oils were used to be applied on the skin. In fact, we have riwayat that the Holy Prophet he loved different types of natural oils, and he disliked himself to be scruffy, and therefore he used to apply oil on his head, on his eyebrows, on his mustache. Perfumed oil into the nose, in the beard. Is there in the sunnah oil? So somebody can't claim in the state of ihram, I want to follow the sunnah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. In the state of ihram, haram. Mustahab, when you apply oil to make a dua. Now look at the reason why it's possible it's made haram. Mustahab, when you apply the perfumed oil, the natural good smelling oil, Allahumma inni as'aluka az-zayna waz-zina wal-mahabba. Oh Allah, I wish to decorate myself, I wish to beautify myself, I wish to gain mahabba and approval amongst the people by being presentable. وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنَ الشَّيْنِ وَالشَّنَانِ وَالْمَقْتِ. And I wish to avoid something which will repel me from the others.